Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the session today. So we'll get started. So today's topic is going to be about Microsoft Purview and data governance. So with further ado, we'll get started. We'll talk about the speakers. The first speaker is myself, Ali Rizwan. I'm an analytics engineer at Seha Consulting. And we also have Saeed Abdurrahman. He's a senior data and an AI analytics consultant at Microsoft. He'll be presenting kind of details about the Microsoft Purview product. Saeed, if you want to just give a few minutes, like a few seconds intro about yourself and kind of your role with Microsoft and type of projects you've done.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. This is Syed. Like Ali mentioned, I am senior consultant in industry solutions division of Microsoft. I've been with the company with almost 1.5 years now, and work in the delivery side of services, and working on different data and AI projects for some of the strategic 500 customers for Microsoft. So during my projects, I did got a little bit of exposure on Purview. Ali got a chance to talk to me around the tool and the data governance and all that. So he invited me to, be able to show something that I have done with the data governance and how different companies are using Purview. So I created a small demo for all of you where, we can go through and look at the tool and its features.
Awesome.
Thanks. Back to you.
Yep, thank you so much. So kind of how we're going to walk through the kind of the demo and the slides here. First, we'll kind of give a little bit of a kind of brief overview about kind of the problems with managing, modern data estates and type of challenges most data shops encounter when they're managing their data assets. We'll talk about common issues that arise, and then we'll walk through certain scenarios that we'll cover inside the demo. So we've got two specific scenarios that we'll walk through that'll show the problems that we're talking about, and then we'll walk through the scenarios, how kind of Purview is going to help tackle those problems. So the walkthrough is just going to be like a diagram just to give you a lay of the land of how the demo is going to go. And then with that, Said's going to walk into the actual demo. We'll kind of open up, the Azure portal, and then we'll walk through the various methodologies of kind of, setting up a Purview workspace and kind of setting up the integrations and details of the features and whatnot within the product. So with that, so just as a kind of an intro, most organizations, when you have a kind of a fairly large data footprint, common problems are for leadership and management and kind of the various users of that data estate is to understand, hey, what type of assets do I have across my data estate, right? So that includes your databases, your data lakes, other operational systems. So, historically, data warehouses have been, in the relational realm, and modern data warehouses with big data platforms and various new file formats have kind of crept into and become an integral part of the modern data estate, such as Parquet files and kind of other file formats in analytics, in the analytics kind of realm of the data estate. And you need a way to kind of catalog everything that's there, and kind of that's one of the problems that we'll kind of touch upon. And then I want to have a mechanism to kind of inform and enforce data policies, right? Like who has access to which data within my data catalog, within my data estate. We'll talk about data policies. Another kind of common use case is around having a rich metadata layer about my data, right? I want to be able to have like, I want to be able to organize my data and classify my data. And when other users kind of come in that are kind of exploring my data, I want them to be able to have, a rich glossary that they can see, hey, this is my data. These are the kind of the definitions and associated with that data in terms of like a business glossary, and also certain data sets that are certain data sets, as you're ingesting them, you can set up like rules and stuff. Hey, if you see this type of data, it's maybe an account number, or it's a customer email or an SSN, which are kind of the standard data, metadata associated with the data, or you may have kind of custom organization level kind of data attributes or data classification or metadata layer, defined for your data to kind of give you a little bit more richer insight. And then, as you're, so, if you have a static data, data platform, it's one thing, but, with the large enterprises, data is changing, new data sources are coming in. And as those new data sources come in, how do I automate essentially the discovery and access of that data, right? So this is where we'll talk about the scans. We want data, the data assets that we have and new data sources get added. I have a process, within Purview that goes out and scans that data. It kind of, does all the things about the metadata layer management and kind of, the classification. And basically you kind of ingest that data and metadata about that data within your, your data catalog. And then the next very, very kind of, if anybody who's kind of, gone in trying to figure out, hey, where's my, what type of data do I have? And if you're looking at a kind of column or a table, hey, where does this actually come from, right? So we're going to talk about some really cool features as far as data lineage is concerned. If you have a kind of a table or a column, you want to be able to see how to trace that back, right? So there's some really neat features around data lineage, within your actual pipelines, within your kind of Azure Data Factory and Synapse is what we'll focus on here, within those pipelines to kind of be able to trace that data back, to its source. And then, in my clients, like I know I have seen a lot of use cases, or kind of one of the kind of primary use cases where kind of clients have wanted to adopt data governance tools are around, you want if you have an analyst that is trying to kind of, create a report, or they're not a developer, right? They are basically just a business user that has no idea about, hey, what are my databases? What are the Parquet files, CSV files, and whatnot, right? They're looking to get a certain metric, right? How do you help that user, right, get a head start? And if they want to build a specific report and whatnot, how you give them a head start to go into your kind of data catalog, look at your business glossaries and see, hey, these are the measures we've defined. This is the data lineage for those measures. Rather than going and hunting, and also, this is the owner of this measure, this measure and the data sources that, populate this measure. That's a very powerful or helpful thing for analysts to kind of cut down the kind of the useless meetings oftentimes we have where, a business user is just kind of requesting something and it kind of goes into the void, and then people are kind of hunting down different data owners and users that might be able to give them access or point them in the right direction to the right developer who could give them the report that they're looking for. If you have that data catalog and source in one place, you're able to give that type of a user kind of a head start on kind of building data products in a streamlined way where they already have everything. They can go and find out kind of what we already have and who to go to kind of request that data. So with that, we're going to talk a little bit about our scenarios. So our scenario, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Ari, this is Sayed. Yeah. I'll be back in 2 minutes, but please continue. I think discussing this scenario will take a moment. I'll be back in a minute or so.
Sure.
Right. Sorry.
Cool.
Thank you.
So we're going to have, so the first thing we're going to talk about from a lineage standpoint is going to be, having an end-to-end lineage, right? So in the diagram here, I show, from an Azure SQL database to a Parquet file down to Power BI. What we're really going to show is the kind of the bulk of our demo is going to be focused on where I have this red line here, where it's going to be really the Azure database to the Parquet file, right? So we're going to have essentially, we're going to basically show that, hey, you connect to a raw data source, you bring that data into your data lake, right? So in a common scenario, right? And then from there, we kind of basically show the lineages. And then even though we're not going to cover the aspects of Power BI, that's a very powerful feature that maybe in like a future talk we can go into it, but I'll cover it briefly in this slide. Is that Microsoft Purview actually gives you the ability to have data lineage from Power BI, right? So if you have a Power BI report, it from your data sets, so it doesn't go down to the column level or the measure level, but from your data sets, to your workspace, to data flows and workspaces, you can track from a data set within Power BI down to kind of, in your ADLS storage layer or down to the other, sources within Purview, and you can track measures and data that's being built in Power BI down to that level. Which, so if you've got a report, you're looking at a report and you know that it comes from this data set, Purview can do a scan on Power BI, detect that data set and build a lineage that, hey, this data set comes from, this source in maybe it's a Parquet file or maybe it's a relational table and where that kind of data goes back to. So, even though unfortunately we won't have time to kind of go in deeper into this feature, but in the future talk, we'll kind of talk a little bit more about it. So he's going to walk through different kind of use cases, and kind of how to set that, the first kind of the red box area, and from a lineage and kind of setting up Purview to set up scans in that layer. The other thing we're going to talk about is around API scenarios, right? So we've, one of the cool things that is possible with the Atlas API that Purview has is, say you have an example where, I have here, you've got a data lake, you've got Azure Purview, and then you have a raw data source that you're about to ingest via, Azure Data Factory or a pipeline. If you want to do some checks, some validations that hey, I'm ingesting this raw data source, into this location via my pipeline, I can check the metadata from Purview against the data that's coming in, and I can perform validations to see, hey, does that new data that's coming in match what I expect from a metadata perspective? Yes or no? And then if it does, you kind of only then Azure Data Factory loads data into the data lake. So, those are, I mean, that's a little bit more of an advanced scenario, but we'll kind of touch briefly upon that, the Atlas API and kind of the capabilities it has. But, there's going to be details in there, but I'll let kind of Said speak to it from this point on. So, Said, take it away.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ali. I'm going to share my screen. Just let me know when you can see it.
Yeah.
Is it up for you guys?
Yep, it is.
Okay, sounds good. Perfect. As Ali mentioned, we have, two scenarios that I wanted to discuss with everyone today. The first of those is about the lineage tracking capabilities of Purview. To demonstrate that, I have created a very simple scenario wherein we have a table sitting in a SQL Server database, and I am loading data from that table into a Azure Data Lake storage account in the Parquet file format, and using Synapse data flows. And once that is done, the lineage is captured in Purview, and you can see the lineage in the tool. So let me walk through the resources that I just spoke about. I created this resource group, which is the one where we have the resources. So like I said, we have a SQL Server resource. We have ADLS Gen 2 account, which is our target, where the data is getting pushed out. And Synapse is my compute to move the data from SQL Server to the ADLS Gen 2. And then ultimately Purview is where all of this being governed and is being tracked for lineage and all. So does the scenario make sense? Does anyone have any question on that? If not, then I'll continue with the tool demonstration.
Yeah, so this makes sense. So basically Synapse is going to be the layer where we actually build our pipeline, right? That's going to be the layer
that's right.
That's going to be used for our ETL.
Yep, that's right. Yep. So let me start with the the SQL Server, which is our source, right? From where we are moving the data. So in my SQL database, I have a few tables and some views, right? So this will show up when I start the scan and do the scan from Purview. This all should show up, right? But just to show that what is the table that I am using in this simple example, I have the table created user activity in my database, which has some product and channel data which tracks the user activity on a website. And this is a table which I will basically move the data from this table to the ADLS Gen 2 account using the Purview. So let's see how to configure all of this to be, first of all, scanned into Purview and then govern and then tracked for lineage. With that, I will move into my Purview account. So what I do is that I click on the Purview account. It will then take me to the home page of this resource. And if you have access on the Purview tool, you should see this link to open the governance portal, right? When you click that, it should take you directly inside the Purview portal. So this is how default home page looks like for the Purview tool, right? I will basically walk you guys through some of the core concepts in Purview, and so that you can relate to what I am saying when I start some of the other configurations and setups in the tool. First of all, you are seeing that on my screen, it lists that I have 3 sources and 30 assets, right? Source is, so let's, start defining these things. Source is anything that you scan in Purview to be governed. So in this case, I have registered 3 sources. Number 1, SQL Server. Number 2, ADLS Gen 2, and number 3, Power BI. So, I mean, although in your ETL scenario, you will have, certain sources and certain targets, but it does not mean that the target becomes a target in Purview. If from Purview perspective, anything that you are tracking or scanning or governing using the tool, that gets defined as a source. So second thing is the asset, right? Asset is any technical artifact that is getting scanned into the tool. By technical artifact, what I mean is that if you are scanning a SQL Server database, your assets could be a SQL Server table, or it could be a SQL Server view, right? Or on the other side, if your source is a ADLS Gen 2 account, then your assets would include the files that are stored in the storage, and the folders that are in the storage. Similarly, you have capability to scan various other different data sources using Purview. Some of those are, I'll show you once we come to that screen. Just bear with me for a moment. Stop something. Yep. All right. So number one concept that I wanted to discuss is the concept about collections, right? What is a collection? So collection in Purview, you can think of it as a mean of logically grouping things inside the tool, right? You could have hundreds of sources in your organization that you want to scan and govern through Purview, right? But then how do you organize all those data sources? So there could be different ways in which you can organize your metadata that you are scanning into the tool, right? So the way or the approach of organizing is up to you, but Purview is giving you this this taxonomy of collection which you can use to sort of organize your data in the organization. So for example, what I have done in my scenario is that I'm considering that I have one operations team in the company that is managing all the OLTP systems, whereas I have another team which is focused on analytics, right? So what I have done is that I have created two collections in my organization. One is called operations, and another is called analytics. In operations, I am scanning the OLTP sources. Like, for example, I scan the SQL Server database. In analytics, I'm going to scan the Power BI tenant, or my ADLS Gen 2, which is dedicated for the analytical data reasons. So let me show you that in a little bit of a graphical version, right? So when you go to sources, you will see that you have this map view option, and inside it, the tool shows you how different collections are related to each other, or what each collection contains, right? So like I said, I have a root collection which is called enterprise data governance, which is basically just a placeholder to contain everything. Inside it, I have created two sub collections, one for the operations team and one for the analytics team, right? Now I can basically define the access permissions based on the collections, so that operations folks, they only can see the operations sources and the assets inside it. And analytics folks can only see the things inside the analytical sources like ADLS Gen 2 or Power BI. And there is no way that one team can interfere with another team's work. So that is basically one of the notions of collection that I wanted to explain. Inside collections, you can then set up different sort of permissions on the collections, right? So what I mean by that is that when I go to data map, right, and collections, it will show me the different collections that exist in my organization, right? One of them, which Purview creates by default, is your root collection, right? Root collection is something that must exist. You cannot operate without having a root collection. Let's dive down into the different access roles that I was talking that you have in the tool. So with a collection, you can have people, part of different roles in the collection, so that they can perform different operations on the assets of that collection. Some of those roles are here, what you can see on the screen, right? Number one is the collection admin. So collection admin is someone who has the super access on this collection. He can perform any of the following things that I will discuss. including any other person to any of these other roles on the collection, right? So the next role is the data source admin, right? So data source admin is a person who can add different data sources or remove or modify the data sources that are registered into a collection. So like I showed in the previous picture that, my collection operations, it has a data source called Azure SQL. I could only do so if I am a data source admin on this collection, right? Just to, sort of demo that thing, what I can do is that, I can go into this operation connections, right? And remove myself as a data source admin of this collection, right? So now you can see that my name, Syed Abdul Rahman, that does not exist as a data source admin on the operations collection at all, right? So what that means is that when I go to the sources tab again and go to the map view, I shouldn't be able to delete or edit the data source Azure SQL. So you see this as, automatically, it has automatically disabled these options for me because I am no more the data source admin. So basically this role is all about, giving you the permissions to be able to, do the changes on the data sources on the collection, right? Number two is the data curator. So data curator is someone, who once you have scanned the assets into the system, they can further enrich the metadata layer of those assets, right? So what I mean by that is that if I go back into my operations collection again, right? So I'm going into my sources and I'm going into this operation collections, right? Okay, so one moment. So basically what I did before is that I restricted permissions on this collection for myself. What it did is that basically, it took me out of all the different roles of this collection, right? So you can see that I'm no more a data reader or data share contributor or policy author, nothing. I only am the collection admin who can add, people to different other roles, but he cannot himself do anything, right? So I want to remove this thing, and I'll explain this in a moment that what this button is, right? So when I come to the data curator, right, now I am the data curator, and what I meant by enriching the metadata layer is this. When I go to the collection, right, from sources, I go into my collection view details, right, and I click on the asset, right. It shows me the list of the different tables, right. I can go into my table user activity, and if I am the data curator, then I am able to, add further metadata into the Purview tool. So I can go in and describe the business meaning of this table, what this table contains. So things like, this table contains user interaction through our website and apps by channels and products, right? I can do that, and I can also, browse the schema of this table. So this is basically the schema when Purview scanned this asset, and we'll look in a moment how to set up a scan and how Purview can automatically scan the things. But as a data curator, you can go in and, change the automated scan metadata. And also what you can do is that you can add some of the other things to your assets. So for example, if you know that, this column, which is called projection, for example, right? This is one of the columns where I'm going to store my driver license number, right? So I can go in and manually classify this column as a driver license number column, right? And then when the other folks come in and look into that asset, they can quickly find out that, if I'm looking for the driver's license number, this is the column where I want to do my select statement. Similarly, there are a few cool options in the tool as well. When you have an organization where the roles and responsibility for the data are well defined, or even if you are not that mature in the process, you would definitely wanna, as a data governance director, or as a data governance office, what you would want to enforce is that there is always someone who takes responsibility for each data set in the organization, right? So in my example, I am showing this user activity table, and I can then go in and define that who is the owner of this table, right? So for example, I can again make myself a owner of this table, right? I'm not sure what does it do. Maybe I'll try this info. Right? And then I can save. And what the tool will do now is that, it will save this information. So now I can see that, there is one data classification applied already on this table. And in the schema, this data classification is, evident that, I have the projection column, which is the driver's license. And then if I'm browsing the asset, I can then go into and see, who is the data owner of this asset, right? So that in case if I have further questions about this table or this data set, I can simply, click the email button here and start my conversation with this person to know more about this data and to find out if that's the right data that I need, right? Some of the other things that you will find when browsing the assets is that, you have the option here to directly open the asset in Power BI. So what it will do is that, it will open a Power BI report in which it will by default create a connection to this table. And then you can basically start browsing the data in Power BI for this table as well, if you have the Power BI license associated with your organizational account, right? So basically, this was about, how you browse the asset, and we came to this screen because we were talking about the roles on the collections, right? So I will move back to the same screen where we were discussing the roles, right? So as a data curator, I can edit the assets, I can enrich the metadata layer of the assets, right? But what if I don't need the permission to enrich the metadata or enhance the asset description, but I just want to, be able to see what exists in this collection, right? So then the data reader role is for you, right? So most of the people in your organizations, they will be given the data reader access so that, they can go and browse the data assets in the organization, right? There will only be a few folks like data governance people or data stewards who will be the data curators that will enrich the data layer, right? But a data reader is someone, who should be given to everyone who needs to browse the metadata. So one thing, that should not be confused by looking at this data reader role is that when someone has this data reader role, it does not mean that he has the access to read the actual data. The actual data access is something that is governed from within the data source or from Purview, and I will come to it in a moment. You can do it through the data policies that you create in Purview, right? So data reader means you have access to read the metadata of this collection, which means you can browse and see the schema and all that, but it does not give you the actual access to the underlying data. You still have to, request the source system owner to get access to the data, which can be a manual process, or it could be a process that, can be sort of automated using Purview tool as well, which I said I'll come to that in a little bit. Data share is something, which is in Purview in the tool at this moment, so I wouldn't go much into its detail. And personally, I haven't explored this option a lot at this time because it's a very newly introduced options. And then data insights reports is something, that gives you some sort of, information about, how many total assets do exist in my collection, and maybe some of the logging information to do that. This is also a newly introduced feature in the tool. Policy author is another role on the collection, which is related to the data access policies, right? So if you are a policy author on a collection, then what you can do is that you can create some policies for default access on the sources on your collection. So things like, if I go to the data policy tab, what I can do is that I can create a new policy, right? And in the policy, what I can describe is that, I can say that this is user access table default access policy. I can do some description to it. And then when I go to define the policy, I can say go in and say that allow, read, or modify or something, right? And then, if I go into my data resources tab, it will show me, what are my different resources. So for example, in my system, I have Azure SQL database, which is the one that I have enabled, right? So you can go in and select the data source that you want to apply to the policy, and then it should let you in. The reason why it is not showing this for me is that I have not basically enabled the data access policies on this data source. So that's why, my SQL data source is not appearing here. But if you enable that, it would show up here. And when we come to the registration of a data source in Purview, I'll show where that button is. So basically what you can do is that, you can select.
I had a quick question. So this is still the metadata, right? This is not the actual data, where the access control policies are still defining the access to the metadata, right?
No, this is the real data. This is the real
to the actual data you can control through Purview.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is like you Purview can be your data access layer as well, not just to the metadata and the glossaries, to the actual raw data. Okay.
Yeah. Purview can be your data access control layer as well.
Got it.
To actually access the data, for example, it depends on the data source, right? If your data source is SQL Server, then you will access the data using a SSMS client tool or something like that, right? But you can, control the access to the actual data using the data access policies. Sounds good. So when you can define the resources, on which resources you want to give the access, and then subject is, again, the security principle. So you can say that, always give access to this user activity table to folks who are in Active Directory group X, and do not give the read access to the people who are in the Active Directory group X, and give the read and write access to all the folks who are in the Active Directory group Y. So things like that you can define, and then these policies will be applied down at the data source level, and Purview will make sure that the data source respects these policies that are set up through the Purview tool, right? Access to the metadata is basically something that we already saw, right? So access to the metadata is just given using this reader role, right? So if you have the reader role, then you can read the metadata, right? Okay, so that was the policy author. He's a person who can define those policy, and workflow admin is basically something which is also in the preview mode at this moment, but this is a really cool feature, right? By the ability of creating different workflows, what you can do is that you can get into the tool, and inside this self-service access policies, again, my sources, I have not authorized Purview to alter my sources, but if you are the data governance people, you should be able to, enable this self-service access policies on your source. And then what it does is that you can define a workflow such that any asset, right? Let me go back to the to my assets, right? So you can define a workflow using this data policy window such that if anyone goes and opens an asset, he can basically request access to that data, which is, sort of provided after a certain workflow is processed or is honored, right? So I can define that, all the data sources that exist in this collection, right? When the user hits this request access button, right? The request should go to the owner of this asset, right? So I can go in and define a logic app workflow, and that workflow, in that workflow, what I can say is that, whenever someone requests access to this collection, go and pick the owner of the asset, right? And send the request to the owner of the asset. With that, what happens is that if I am the person who needs access on this address table and Ali is the owner, I can go in and hit this request access button, and then the request will go to Ali and as an email, or it could come as a notification inside the tool itself as well. And then Ali will get notified, and if he approves me, I get the access. I get the notification to the email that, congratulations, you have the access on the address table. Ali has granted you that, and there you go. You can go in and access the table. So that is, one of the very powerful features that has been, introduced into the tool. At this time, what I know is that it is supported for ADLS Gen 2 data source, possibly for SQL Server as well, but I'm not sure. But you can definitely go into the Purview documentation website, which is basically maintained by the Purview product team, and you can go in and check what features are available and what are not, right? All right. So going back to the collections, right? I believe we have covered all the different roles that you can define in the collection, and we have discussed why do the collection exist. And the next step would be to add the metadata to the collection, right? So how do we do that? To do that, first, what we have to do is to register, data sources such that the data could be scanned in, right? So you would see that in my view, I have scanned the SQL Server database into the operations collections, right? What I can do now is that I can go in and try to register, show you the experience of how you can do the same thing again, right? So when I click on I can go back again. When I click on this register button under the sources tab, you can see that these are all the available data sources that can be scanned by Purview and cataloged in Purview, so that you can add the further, information about the metadata layer and enrich the metadata. And on some of these sources, wherever the product supports and whatever feature support has been added, over the time, you'll be able to govern those data sources also for access using Purview. So things like, you can already see that, you can scan things from AWS, you can scan, definitely most of the Azure data stores like blob storage, SQL Server, Azure SQL, dedicated pool on Synapse database, right? But then you can also scan things like Cassandra, DB2, Hadoop, and MySQL. You have the ability to scan from various different variety of SAP sources like BW, ECC, HANA, right? And you can also scan things from other storages like Snowflake and Teradata, right? So I will go in and just demo the behavior, how it shows up when you try to register a SQL Server data source, on the tool. So when you try to, register a SQL Server, so the first thing that you have to do is to give it a good name, right? So you can say that Azure SQL #2. And while naming, you have to maintain a certain name format that it should not contain spaces and all that, right? Under this, then it gives you the names of the SQL servers that I have available in my, environment. So for example, I can select then this one. And the next thing is basically to hit the register button. And once I do this, it will register me this SQL Server database. Now, one more thing that you will see here is that data access policies to be assigned to this source. This is the option that I was saying that, until and unless you have this option selected, you cannot create policies, data access policies on Purview for this data source, right? So in my data source, I did not have this enabled. That's why, Purview did not let me to create any policies on this data source. But if you enable, then you should be able to create a data policies. That is, something that we can maybe cover later on, sort of an advanced topic. But this is how you can simply add a data source using Purview, right? The next thing that you need to do in order to import the metadata into the tool, right, is that you have to start creating the scans against your collection or against your data source, right? So how to create those scans? To create a scan, what you do is that you go into the details of the data source, right? When you go into the details of the data source, there, you will see the option of seeing all the scans that have been set up for this data source, right? So creating the data source does not mean that Purview will automatically start to import the metadata for that source, right? To start importing the metadata, you must define the scans or schedule the scans or execute them so that the metadata could be loaded in, right? Okay. So how do you create the scan, right? To create the scan, you have this new scan button. Hello. Okay. To create the scan, you had this scan button. You give the scan, scan a name, and then. By the way, can everyone hear me? Ali?
I can hear you.
Okay, sounds good, perfect. Okay. All right. So to create the scan, you can then go in and select, your database, right? And then the next thing is that you have to, let Purview know that what is the authentication that I'm going to use to scan the data source, right? You cannot simply scan any data source until and unless you have the access on the data source, right? Otherwise, you could simply go in and select the whole enterprise, right? There is no security. So of course, all data sources, they would have some sort of security defined with them, and then you will have to allow the credential that you are using to scan into Purview so that the data source could be scanned. So you will see that, here what I have said is that I'm using the credential Microsoft Purview MSI, which is the system identity of Purview. So I'm telling that, to scan the data, I'm going to use the Purview system identity. Now, what I need to make sure is that my data source should allow Purview to read the data. If it does not allow Purview to read the data, then Purview wouldn't be able to scan. The scans will simply start failing. To do that, what I have to do is that well, different data sources, they have different sort of security, mechanism built into them. With SQL Server, you define logins and users at the database level so that you can scan. In ADLS Gen 2, you have the RBAC, or you can go down to the ACL level to define the permissions, right? In this case, I'm going to show you the SQL Server, that how you can, allow Purview to scan a SQL Server database, right? What I have to do is to simply execute a couple of statements. So you'll see that, I am on this SQL, which is called ASQSBI, right? And this is exactly the same data source that I have here in my Purview. So what I need to do is that I need to do basically execute these couple of statements on my SQL Server so that Purview can scan it, right? So this is, not something that I invented by myself. So you can, easily go into Purview Microsoft documentation and find all of this information from there, right? That how to set up SQL Server scans using Purview. And similarly, you can find this information for other data sources as well. So what I have to do is that first I have to register Purview as an external provider in my Azure SQL database. The next thing that I should do is that I should create a user inside the database that I want to scan, right? And then give that user reader permissions so that that user can then scan the database, right? So what you will notice here is that this exactly matches the name of my Azure Purview resource, right? Otherwise, this wouldn't allow to scan. So the next thing is basically after you have let the credentials, you have defined the credentials and everything. The next thing that you want to do is that you want to tell Purview that which collection you want to scan the data, right? So let's suppose you have another scenario where only where you want finance people to be able to look at finance metadata, and supply chain folks should only be able to see their metadata. So there shouldn't be any cross data references. In that scenario, what you can do is that you can define a scan for the tables that only belong to financial data domain to be scanned into your financial collection. And similarly, supply chain collection would be having the data scanned from the supply chain tables. In my scenario, I have a very simple scenario. Again, the whole data source is getting to the operations collection, so I don't need to change the collection. It already selected it for me. But if you needed to change the collection, you can possibly do that. And then also, the lineage extraction is something which is also in public preview. What it will do is that, it will not only extract the lineage from by processing the data from Synapse or any other tool, but also what it would do is that if you have performed some data transformations using stored procedure in a SQL Server database, it could even track that lineage. So it's a cool feature. It's in Purview. I haven't tried that, but I would encourage you to try that if you are excited about this feature. I will turn it out off for now, and next what it will show you is that how to set up the scan for different things, right? So then with my scan, like I said, if I don't want to scan the whole database, I can certainly do a selection on the assets that I only want to scan, right? And then hit continue. And then the next option is basically, these are some scan rule set policy. You should always go ahead. You can always go ahead and use the system default rule sets, right? Other important thing is that setting up the trigger or scheduling the scan, right? So if you want to, scan your data sources, after a certain period every time, what you can do is that you can set the cadence for your scans. So you can say that, scan, this scan should execute every 1 month on this particular date of the month, right? Otherwise, what you can do is that you can set it to to execute every 1 week or every X number of weeks on a particular day at a particular time, right? So you can mention here that what is the scan time in UTC at which you want to run this, right? So one thing to note here is that by default, the tool is not giving you any option to scan more than once in a week, right? But it does not mean that you cannot scan more than once in a week. You can definitely leverage the scan APIs of Microsoft Purview to create your own custom application or create a, for example, trigger in Synapse that executes more than once in a week. And then that trigger can use a web activity to call the API for a scan to run that scan. So, that is another way how you can do it. So once I do the scan, right, it will sort of scan in all the data into my collection, right? And the similar thing I have done in my ADLS Gen 2, I have created a scan for the ADLS Gen 2 account, right? But I wouldn't, go into its detail in the favor of saving some time for us, right? After all of these assets are scanned into the system, right? What you can do is that, you can definitely go and start browsing the assets, right? So you can, when you start on browse assets, right, you can start browsing by source type or by collection. There are some of the default options that are available, right? So I would wanna go by collection. I have different collections, analytics and operations. If I would wanna see that what my operation collection has, I can click on that collection and then start browsing all the assets, right? So it's showing me that, I have these SQL Server tables and, schema in the table, schema in the database. And then I finally have some views as well, right? So also some of the other filters that you have available are, contact filter. So if there's a contact associated with the asset, you can filter by that contact. Also, you can filter by the classifications, right? And then you can also filter by the asset type. So if you just want to see the stored procedures, you can select that. Or if you just want to see files, you can do that. If you just
say,
yep.
One thing I wanted to mention was around the cost, right? Like when you're setting up the scans, this can be a very cost-intensive process, right? Depending on the rules you have. I want to talk a little bit about that and the kind of the best practices around how often you want to set those up, like from a cost perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if you think that your data sources are not frequently changing, and this is the scenario in most of the production environments, right? Because you mostly have a cadence set to your environment update releases, right? So let's suppose if your company follows a policy of one release per week or a couple of releases per week, then you can set the cadence for these scans that way. So there is a notion which is called, I think, data processing unit or data scan units, right? So the cost that Azure, charges you is based on those. So that is dependent on number of operations that it performs while scanning, or while applying the policies and etc. So yeah, I mean, definitely I wouldn't advise to set up infinite scans on your sources. Only set up scans to the cadence which makes sense in your scenario, because that is bound to the cost of the tool. Yep.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, I mean, you can browse the things and all that, right? But then, and then we also saw that, how you can update the metadata layer using the tool. The next thing that I wanted to show real quick is that how do you basically start to populate some lineage in the tool, right? So one of the supported compute from where Purview can extract the lineage is Microsoft Synapse, Azure Synapse. And it can also do so from Azure Data Factory, right? It can do that from Power BI as well if your tenant allows you to do that. And secondly, you can do that from some of the other data sources like SQL Server Stored Procedures and others, right? So I would want to show real quick, how you can do that from Synapse, right? So this is a Synapse instance in my, same subscription that I spin up for this this session that we are having today,
So
right?
one quick note I want to just kind of call out to the folks in the audience is like this feature of being able to set up a scan and lineage down to the pipeline level. It's only available in Purview, to my knowledge. Other tools, you can set up scans on objects and assets within a database, but within a copy data activity, within a Synapse pipeline or data flow activity, that is to my knowledge, that's only you can do that in Purview. Sorry, go ahead.
Sounds good. Yep, it makes sense, Ali. Thanks for adding the detail. Okay, so in my Synapse environment, first thing that I want to make sure is that my Synapse is integrated with Purview for Lineage, right? So to integrate my Synapse instance with Purview, I have to go to the Manage tab, and then within it, there's this Microsoft Purview selection option available, right? So I have to go into Microsoft Purview, right? Here, I mean, my Purview is already connected to Synapse. But if your Synapse instance is not connected to Purview, then you will see a connect option. And once you select that option, it will show you the Purview instances in the subscription that you have access to. And you can simply select that Purview instance and hit connect. So there's, it's not a very, complex process. It's a very simple process. You go and select your Purview instance, hit connect, and then it will automatically connect the Purview for the lineage tracking within the Synapse for you. So the next thing that you see is something similar to what you see on my screen, is that it shows that the Purview account to which it is connected is this one, right? All right. So once I connect the Purview with my Synapse, the next thing is that generate some lineage data from Synapse so that you can see that in Purview, right? So to do that, what I did is that I create a very simple pipeline in Synapse. This pipeline has a data flow activity, which is taking data from ADLS Gen 2, from SQL Server and loading that into an ADLS Gen 2 Parquet data source, right? So you will see that in my data flow, the source that I have selected is the same SQL database, right? That I was showing. There's a link service reference here, right? And this link service is pointing to the same SQL data source. And the source option, I went ahead and selected that, okay, I want to use table as a source, right? What table? It is defined here. And then after that, okay, to be able to see the data in preview, you should start the debug option of the data flow, right? So I just started that. But on the other hand, you'll see that what is my target, right? My target is actually a Parquet file, which is on my ADLS Gen 2 link service, right? And under the settings, I have told it that where is the location where this data is going, right? So this Parquet data is going to get loaded into the data container on my ADLS Gen 2. Create the folder data.lsbi, and under it, the folder for the data in Parquet, which is, which I named as the user activity, the same name as the table name, right? So I can show you that real quick on ADLS Gen 2.2. Right, so this is my ADLS account. This is my data container, right? since I have already executed this pipeline, you will see that the folders exist and the data exists as well, right? So it has loaded the data for me here. All right, so let's see. Okay. So we can possibly wait for this, but in the meantime, what I will show you is, you know, how can we track this lineage, right, in the Purview tool. So once you execute this pipeline, right, you will see, actually, let's wait for it in a moment. I would like to show this.
One thing
I can take questions if, you know, any of the audience folks, they have questions.
I guess Mario, Baron, do you guys have any questions so far?
No questions for me. Good info.
Nope, looking good. Thank you.
Great. One thing I will add, we're probably gonna, is the lineage there saved or is it? We have to wait for the data flow to run.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe we can wait, but looks like it's taking some time. By the way, yeah, I mean, what I just wanted to tell here is that once you execute this, you will see, you know, a message or notification here under the execution tracking that the lineage status is success, which means that, you know, the lineage has been successfully pushed to the Purview tool. There is nothing else, you know, that you will see here. The actual lineage is something, like I said, you will see in the Purview tool itself. So I think we are good to move to Purview and see the lineage experience, Ali.
Got it.
All right. So lineage. So now I know that, you know, in my data flow, my data source table, by the way, it also started, but in my data flow, you know, my source is the table user activity in the database, right? So let's see what it shows to me in Purview. Does it show any links of this user activity table with anything or not, right? So one more way, I mean, another way of looking at or trying to find an asset in the tool is that you start typing in the asset name, right? So I type in the asset name. I'm going to filter by collection operations because I want to see the database. So here it is showing me that I have the user activity table scanned into Purview, right? It shows a good hierarchy here, right? That how does the asset, where is the asset located inside your actual data source, right? So you will see what's the SQL server, what's the database, what's the schema, and then ultimately the table. And then the lineage is something that I really wanted to show you, right? Since I already processed this from Synapse and Synapse pushed the lineage, you will see that the lineage option, if I click on the lineage, it shows me, you know, some links of this SQL table. Okay, so what it is telling me that this SQL table is being processed here in load user activity, which is Synapse data flow activity. And this data flow activity is pushing the data to the user activity asset, which is again something on ADLS Gen 2, right? So this is good. Let's see what else it can do for us, right? So you'll see that on the left side, it is giving me an option to even go in and be able to see the lineage by columns, right? So it is showing me the table columns, right? Now, if I want to know that where is this product column, you know, being used across my enterprise data estate or down the stream. So you can clearly see that, you know, maybe, something else, what I can do is that I can select multiple here, right? So if I want to see that where this product column is loaded, or used in some of the other data products or data assets in my company, right? I can clearly see that when I hover on this product column, it highlights on the other side this product column, which is a Parquet table field, right? So this tells me that this user activity table product column is being used by this Parquet table, right? Or is loaded in this Parquet table. Now think of yourself as a source system owner who wants to know that if I make a change in my application data layer, who would get impacted of that change and who should be notified about that change, so that down the stream other data assets or other applications do not break up by me making a change, right? So Purview has made that job really simple for you by going into the tool and using the lineage feature, right? And then let's suppose in my next deployment, I'm going to altogether remove this, product column from the table. I know that what are the assets that are impacted by it. And then by going into the asset from here and checking the asset context, then I can find out that who is the owner of that asset, right? So if the data curator, he populated the owner of the asset, then I can know that okay, this is the person who needs to be informed about a change in this in my field, right? So then you can basically proactively avoid any of the breakages in the downstream systems by the help of this lineage, right? So I think it's a very cool feature that you can leverage in order to find out the impact of the changes in the data assets that you own across the organization, in other data products in the organization, right? And that is from the perspective of our data system, data source owner, right? But think on the other side as a data analyst, if you want to know that I have a Power BI report and this report is basically built using a couple of SQL tables, right? Or a couple of SAP tables, right? Then you can easily find out that, what are the tables or sources which are used to develop this report. And maybe the report that you needed for activity is not the one that comes from your custom built application, which is developed on SQL Server, but the user activity that you were looking for had to become from Adobe or from SAP. By the help of Lineage, you can find out that the report that you are looking at is getting populated from the right source, right? So yeah, I mean, there are various different use cases and uses of Lineage that a company can have. These are some of the cases, but the capability is there, and you can start to push Lineage to Purview to further enrich your metadata layer in a tool.
So I think from my perspective, this feature, typically your pipeline is not really visible to your business users, right? So Purview is really exposing your ETL pipelines, not just the tables and stuff, but the inner workings of your pipeline as well, which is pretty neat.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And one thing which is really cool is that it can get you the column level lineage as well. So in our scenario, we just built a very simple pipeline, which is a one-to-one mapping from one column to another column. But I think we should also try by creating a column, by concatenating a couple of source columns, right, and see what does it do, right? So if I select and hover on the target column, does it show me two columns on the left side or only one column, right? So things like that, I think I should be able to show that level of lineage as well. Or it could even be.
Any other questions from the audience so far, or we're good? Okay, sorry. Go ahead, say.
Okay. No, I think that's pretty much it that I wanted to show in relation to the lineage, right? Some of the other things which would be useful would be exploring the APIs. Like we mentioned earlier in the presentation, that you can use the Purview APIs to sort of extract the metadata from your code itself, rather than going into the tool itself, right? So I just opened a couple of references from the product documentation website, right? So in the product documentation, you have different tutorials which give you a good overview of the Purview APIs and how to use those APIs. So for example, this page gives you the REST APIs of Purview. So I can possibly, put the link in the meeting chat for the folks who wanna, explore that. And again, this is, easily searchable through the internet as well. But since we are already here, I'm just sharing those links. So you will see that, there are some, so in the middle of this, session, what I was saying is that, there are some APIs that you can use to scan more than once in a week, right? Because the tool by default, it only gives you the access or option to scan a data source once in a week, right? But what if you want to do more than that? You can use this API and then trigger the scan as many times as you want, right? But again, be mindful of your scan counts, because that is what that determines your cost. So you don't want to overpay Microsoft, right? So this is, for example, one of the most used REST API that you can use to trigger scans. And then, yeah, I mean, so there's some other APIs as well that you can leverage. But the resources here, you can go in and check on Microsoft documentation. There are a couple of other things that I found helpful and would like to share with the audience. Number one is this link. This is a very good, lab or workshop created by someone. I'm not sure if he's a Microsoft employee or what, but he has created that, Purview workshop on GitHub. So if you wanna, experiment more with the tool, play with the tool, right? What you can do is that you can follow the instructions on this GitHub page, and spin up an instance of Purview for yourself, and you can do the labs that are defined in this in this workshop, right? So it has some certain different learning modules. It has some REST API things as well. I haven't personally gone through this, but this is something that I recently gathered from one of my colleagues. So just wanted to share with you, and I leave it up to you to explore this to further get a better grip on the tool. Apart from that, there is one more link. I'm not sure if this is accessible outside of for people who are outside of Microsoft as well or not, but there is one more. Actually, this link will work for you guys. Yep. There's one more, demo Purview environment setup GitHub project or repo which is created. So you can use that to quickly deploy environment with Azure Purview, and I think it has SQL server at the back end of it. So you can, use this, GitHub resource link as well and deploy a Purview demo environment for yourself or for your customers and start playing with it. So you can see that, there are different various things that are defined here. I'm not sure if these things are already created inside the Purview instance or these are the instructions to, start playing with this, but I just wanted to share this link with the audience as well so that, you guys can do more by worrying for less, right? Things are already set up here. You can accelerate deployment of the resources and start learning the tool quickly, right? That's pretty much it. If any questions, feel free to ask, or otherwise I will turn the table back to Ali.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. Thank you everyone for joining. If there's no questions, we'll call it a day.
Thanks a lot. I did have one question, and sorry if it was already covered, but you noted that some of in the lineage, it showed a Synapse workflow, and I think it could also show a data factory workflow. Sorry, does it have a list of all the different ETL engines that it can scavenge metadata from? Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So yeah, at this time, what I know is that it can do it from Data Factory as well, of course, from Synapse, but there should be give me a moment. I'm trying for that online, so it should be there in the Microsoft documentation as well. Lineage Purview. Yeah, I mean, off the bat, what I know is that you can do it from Synapse, from Data Factory, from Power BI as well. So something like this, right?
Actually, I had a, oh, you're sharing. Okay, great.
Yep. So, this is the link of that page. I can put that on the chat too.
So now, Baron, did you have a particular kind of use case you were looking for?
Sort of, and I'm sorry I haven't done my research, but just throughout life, it's like data can get transformed in so many different ways. So like SSIS packages, which I know can be upgraded to Data Factory, but or run in different ways. But so SSIS or even DBT or a stored, even better, the holy grail of like parsing SQL of like a stored procedure or a merge statement. Which I doubt, or like, I don't know if that feature exists, but that'd be super cool. But no, so no specific use case, but just sort of all the ones I mentioned. And then maybe even then a separate question of whether you can author or like annotate or generate some of these graphs with like on your own instead of like through a scan. That's like a separate question, but just is there like a way to freeform enter like data flows?
No, I don't think that you can create your own lineages. You mean if the tool does not scan automatically, can you create the lineage by yourself or not? No, I don't think
So
no. I don't think you can custom create a lineage for the asset.
so when you're talking about custom creating, that is you kind of go into a data source, right? And kind of scrape metadata and build your own lineage kind of. I mean, I guess that would be like outside of the scan, like not use the scan, but if something is not supported within Microsoft Purview to scan, you create something on your own to kind of pull that data into Purview. Was that the question?
Yeah, either something to pull it in or even a way to author it, almost like an SSIS or a data factory flow where you're just like getting the widgets and then tying them together, just almost like you would in a PowerPoint, just doing it by hand. But yeah, definitely something to scrape from a non-supported source would be awesome. But I'd be okay with even like a PowerPoint type, thing where you're just dragging and clicking and connecting things.
And then attach it into the tool.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I think I did not see that option when I was looking through the different kind of source systems. As you like to be able to manually kind of input data sources. So yeah, I did not see that option.
Yeah, I think it. I don't think that you can create custom lineages in the tool if it is not supported for automatic extraction of the lineage. But yeah, whatever is available, you can definitely use the lineage extraction of Purview, to scan that. So what I was saying is that at this time, what is available is, extracting the lineage for Data Factory, Synapse, Power BI, data sets. And one more thing that I was showing before, maybe if you noticed, was that it can now scan the SQL Server database compiled code and extract the lineage from there as well. That is in preview. I haven't, personally seen the experience, but looks like it is trying to track the lineage for views and maybe stored procedures. I'm not 100%, but I think it would be a good thing to look.
Can you share that link, say in the chat? Because I saw something similar. Because I think you mentioned, Baron, DBT and like other tools you mentioned, like the Holy Grail being able to kind of go through and scan SQL, so like SQL statements. And I'd be curious to know about that as well, if stored procedures can be scanned. I think that was one of your questions, correct?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
Yeah. So yeah, it's in preview. So I know there's a lot of investment within the tool set, and right now I think there was even discussion of bringing in like Spark pipelines, which aren't supported right now, because within Synapse you can build like Spark pipelines as well. So I know that was something I've heard is also on the roadmap, and there's a lot of work being done. So I wouldn't be surprised 6 months from now, if we're talking about Purview, you're looking at some of those features.
Yeah, and by the way, there is work underway or maybe already done. Oh yeah, this is my colleague, man. Yep. Okay, yeah. So there is work already underway to track the lineage or extract the lineage from Spark code as well. So if you have Databricks notebooks or you have Synapse notebooks that are doing data transformations and loads and whatever. There is work in place which is going to provide that lineage in Purview itself as well. So yeah, Databricks and Synapse Spark pools and Synapse notebooks. Those are also on the list to be.
This is in preview or this is live?
I'm not sure if that is live yet or not, but that is in the product roadmap for sure.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah, it can come anytime in the market, maybe in the next quarter or the quarter after the next quarter, but it is in the roadmap.
Got it.
Yep. Yeah. So I work in the consulting division of Microsoft, which which previously used to be Microsoft Consulting Services. So I'm not the direct sort of representative of the product or not coming from the product team, but we do definitely work closely with the product folks since we are implementing the products for different customers. So I do remember some conversations, a couple of days back that we were discussing for a client that they had the need for scanning from Spark notebooks created in Synapse. And, I sort of heard that is in the roadmap for the product to be available after some time.
Very cool. Thank you.
All right. I hope it was useful for the folks on the call.
Yeah.
And thank you, Ali, for inviting.
Well.
Thanks, Ryan.
Appreciate it, guys.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.